Everyone is familiar with the saying, there is no such thing as a stupid question. Many years ago, I worked as an assistant store manager in retail, and it was my responsibility to make sure that my employees attended a multiple store pre-Christmas meeting where we were taught steps on how to counter shoplifters. During the meeting, one of the most important points that was brought up was that we were to greet each customer that comes into the location and maintain at least a few seconds of eye contact. This lets the shoplifter know that we are aware of them coming into the location. Immediately following the meeting, one of my employees came up to me and asked what I thought was the most stupid question I had ever heard. He said, "Michelle, why do we greet customers?" I was floored, but it wasn't a stupid question, and I'd like to explain why. First, let me tell you about engrams. Engrams are the most fundamental element of a memory. We learn by putting the engrams together until they form a process. This can be something simple like sweeping a floor, or it could be very complicated like programming a computer. Learning is made up of two different types of steps. The first step is shallow learning. During shallow learning, the employee is given only a specific amount of information. And it could be limited because the person teaching them just may not have time to take it up into the deep learning process. It could be that the job is basic and only requires a specific amount of learning. Or maybe the person learning does not have clearance to go any higher, and so once they reach a certain point, the job is handed off to someone who does have the clearance. Or the person may be physically or mentally disabled and just unable to process anymore. During deep learning, the shallow learning is treated as a base and built on with deep learning. That makes the distance between the deep learning and the goal much shorter when compared to the shallow learning and the goal. During the learning process, the person who's learning, who I will now refer to as an employee, is taught to own the process. I know when I own something, I like for it to be the best condition that it can be, and I'm sure that you do as well. Deep learning is taught with a three-step process. The first step is observation. This is where the employee observes how the process is done. The second step, self-directed inquiry, is where the employee decides why the process is working the way it is. Is it the best that it can be, or can it be better? The third step, self-discovery, is when the employee decides, yes, the process can be done better, I know how to do it, and I'm going to make it happen. A benefit of deep learning is that employees who have deep learning become independent thinkers, and they're able to adapt when the situation changes. Imagine that you are a retail clerk. The person standing at your register right now may be totally different than the person that you just helped, or the person who's waiting in line to come up to your register. You have to be able to adapt to each one of them separately so that you don't make them angry. So how do companies know the best way to train their employees? Well, throughout history, researchers have come up with different types of tests that help companies understand how their employees think. For example, in the innovation category, there's a test called PDCA, which stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. In the personality category, there's a test called INTJ, which stands for Introverted, Intuitive, Thinking, Judging. And in the learning category, there's a test called OODA, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. This test is popular with the military. So now the companies have employees that are into the deep learning process, and they're able to step forward into the innovation process. There is a new 6-step innovation process called IDEA, ADIIEA. The A stands for automation, and this performs the base of the process. I don't recommend staying in the automation process for long because a competitor can come along and start doing the same process as you, usually at a lesser cost, which means that they can charge customers less and steal them away from you. So the process needs to be disrupted periodically, and it can be disrupted by employees who just aren't happy with the situation but have no idea of how to improve it, or it could be disrupted on purpose as the company moves to making the process better. Disruption is the second step. The third step is investigation, and this is where the process is looked at and we try to figure out ways of making it better. The ideation process is next, and this is where we actually take the ideas that we come up with for working with the process to make it better. In expectation, the ideas are started to put into a plan of action, And in the final step, affirmation, this is where the management gives approval for the plan to go on, and it can be put into process. So shallow learning is good, deep learning is better. In fact, deep learning is actually critical for the idea process. Earlier I spoke to you about my coworker who asked what I thought was the most stupid question I had ever heard. Michelle, why do we greet customers? A few months after that meeting, his mother came into my location and told me she had taken him to the doctor, and the doctor had diagnosed him as having Asperger's syndrome, which is a high-functioning form of autism. No one knew he had it, including himself. So I knew then that the question he asked me wasn't stupid, it was his way of processing the information, even if it was just repeating what he had already learned in the hour-long meeting we had gone through. And that let me know that the question wasn't stupid, because there is no such thing as a stupid question. Thank you.